what will be the hit to the economy, to jobs and to people's livelihoods. And in Bolton, a town already struggling, the consequences could be devastating.
That film by Helen Thomas and Nick Blakemore. Well, I'm joined now by Miata Fahnbulleh, Chief Executive of the New Economics Foundation think tank, and the Conservative MP, John Penrose. Good evening to both of you. John Penrose, first of all, Rishi Sunak said that hardship is ahead for many people. Is that just inevitable?
I'm afraid it probably is for at least some of us, yes. And you know, if we could possibly avoid it, then we would. I think actually what Rishi's been doing to try and introduce things like the furlough scheme has probably made it a great deal less painful. But as you said in your opening remarks, we're about to hear the economic figures for the last couple of weeks, and it looks very likely as though we're in a recession. Recessions, doesn't matter if it's caused by a pandemic or anything else, recessions hurt.
So does that mean
it's going to be very difficult? Does
that mean if there's a second wave and a second lockdown, there won't be any second furlough?
I think we will, because we know more about how to fight the virus now. I think what everyone will try and do is not have to shut down the whole economy if you can possibly avoid it. Partly because it's bad for the economy. It's also bad for people who aren't ill. It's far better if you're putting people into quarantine to put the ill people into quarantine rather than all the healthy ones. So I think what the aim will be to have localized lockdowns where you can quarantine the people who are infected or who might be infected, but keep the rest of the economy going, keep everybody getting back as close to normal as you can.
Isn't that the more realistic idea going forward than actually extending furlough?
Well, look, the furlough scheme was the right response to an unprecedented crisis, and that crisis hasn't gone away. So we have sectors of the economy, like the arts, that are still in lockdown. We have sectors like hospitality that are being forced to operate below capacity because of social distancing restrictions, parts of the country that will be put in lockdown. So, you know, my view is the furlough scheme is still appropriate. It will need to be modified and it needs to be targeted at sectors that are disproportionately hit.
Can we afford it? I mean, money may be cheap now, but it won't always be cheap.
Well, I think we can afford it, partly because the cost, you know, we're looking at mass unemployment, we're looking at businesses that would otherwise be viable collapsing. If we don't look to stem that, the cost of it will be huge going forward. And this, when the cost of financing our debt is at historically low levels, is absolutely the time to be borrowing in order to prop up the economy.
John Penrose, are we actually talking about another revolution akin to the agrarian revolution, the industrial revolution, that our working lives will look completely different in the future? We're going to have to accept, for example, a shorter working week, more like a German working week. 32 hours would be the norm, for example, in order to throw employment around for everybody and make sure that everybody has something.
Well, I think a professional economist would be very leery of that notion. They have this thing called the lump of labour fallacy, which says you can't just take the existing work and spread it around more thinly. Actually, what you need to do is to allow some people to work more, some people to work less. But if governments start to try and dictate that, that's a short route to having a
But don't we have something like a 40-hour week or a 35-hour week dictated anyway?
Well, but people can still work more if they want. So I think that you're right to say that the new normal, you know, the new economy post-COVID will be different. It's just no one knows quite exactly how it will be. But I don't think anybody, for example, is shedding many tears for not having to commute quite so much to and from work. That might be a permanent change, or at least part of a permanent change.
But the impact on that, of course, of the way that towns operate and cities operate will be phenomenal.
Yeah. Yes.
Do you accept that actually some people are going to work more and some people are going to work less and some people just aren't going to? I mean, we're looking at going up to, at the end of the year, a 10% unemployment rate. That's going to sit with us for a long time.
That is, but I don't think it's inevitable. So there will be jobs that are lost, but government action now is absolutely critical. And, you know, the furlough scheme is something we adopted from Germany that fared far better through the 2009 crash because they put the scheme in place. Other countries are opting to extend it because they recognise that we are in the midst of a pandemic and it requires sustained, unprecedented action.
Really, I mean, France are talking about 2 years, Germany is 21 months. Are you really suggesting that in the UK we can afford a furlough scheme of 2 years?
I think we absolutely can, because I think the cost, the counterfactual of mass unemployment will be far more damaging and costly for the economy, so we can afford it. And I go back to the fact the cost of borrowing is at historically low levels. If ever you were going to do this sort of measure,
you heard we don't have a second furlough scheme. There's not going to be a second furlough scheme. John was saying that the chances of that are very minimal.
I think the Chancellor's going to have to rethink. I think when the prospect of mass unemployment is facing us in the autumn, he will look at the scheme and he will think, why it makes absolutely no sense. Why on earth would you not continue to provide the support when you are freezing parts of the economy, which is in essence what the government is still having to do?
Do you think Rishi Sunak has given himself any wriggle room that would lean towards what Miatta's saying?
So you're asking me? Or...
Yes, John.
Sorry, apologies. I think that because the furlough scheme and all the other schemes were really generous to begin with, and rightly so, what that's meant is that there's much less scope going forward.
So when you have the people, to say, when you have the stories of the people in each of the films, they want to work, they volunteer, they take 50% pay cuts. They look, you heard one of the women saying that, she's 50, probably her working life is over. Is that the reality for the people?
I don't think it has to be, and I sincerely hope it isn't. I mean, I would agree with the earlier comment that government action really matters and government action now matters, but it's a different kind of action. It's about trying to help people, if necessary, to reskill. If there's a change in the way our economy works and people need new skills, then government needs to help them get those skills so that if we have to alter what we do and how we do it, that we all stay employable. And
so that's interesting. So you're saying that actually...
That's a sustainable answer.
Yeah, there might be much more targeted support for different sectors.
Well, there's already been actually not targeted support for different sectors. There's already been things like the Kickstart scheme and the job retention bonus, both of which are aimed at helping people either move into new jobs or to reskill themselves, or to get firms to keep people in work and not lay them off and keep them in work through Christmas. So that's the kind of thing which makes for sustainable employment, rather than depending on political will to carry on rolling over a subsidy. Actually, the best guarantee of a long-term job is a company that needs you because there's money in it and there's a sustainable job at the end of the day.
Thank you both very much indeed. Well, that's it for tonight. Mark will be here tomorrow night. Until then, from all of us at Newsnight, good night.